So I have forever been meaning to experiment with more short-form stuff because YouTube videos have simply gotten far too long these days. And I'm also still in the throes of working on a TikTok script that may or may not come together, but it's too big to do in a month and I wanted to make sure I left patrons with something to watch. So let's try an experiment. A really short episode about a game I played this week in a video made also this week. I'm not sure whether this will go up on the main channel. On the one hand, smaller videos that are patron exclusive might induce more patrons. On the flip side, shorter videos tend to be more about smaller games, and I don't think asking people to pay for coverage of those is to anybody's benefit, so maybe a timed exclusive thing? We'll see. Anyways, a super short episode on Hyperbolica. Structurally, Hyperbolica is a first-person adventure game where you meet random people and do chores for them, or explore spaces in order to find objects that can help you progress through the game's story. The twist is that the whole game happens in non-Euclidean space. So instead of our normal conception of space, we have hyperbolic space, a world where lines are described as arcs in a unit circle called a Poincaré disk. And since all lines are arcs, as you move along one, others may curve towards or away from you in ways that they don't in Euclidean space. There's a whole lot of geometry involved in that, and frankly, I don't understand it, but the good news is that you don't really have to understand the math to play the game. The experience of moving through Hyperbolica is one where the world feels like it falls away into becoming a matte painting 10 feet or so from you. But as you move into the painting, and the 10-foot border moves with you, and small details on the horizon quickly blossom into full-blown spaces that were simply too close to the edge of the disc to be seen before. It might be because I've been researching the platform, but it reminds me of that TikTok meme a while back about zooming into people's art using a special filter that sort of emulates a weird field of view. It is awesome and also kind of off-putting. It's one of the first-person games that's managed to give me a sense of motion sickness. And while I haven't tried playing it this way, the game also supports VR, which I have to imagine is pretty trippy. But its movement is just so unlike anything else I've ever played, and I haven't played a game that made me rethink my relationship with space itself like this since the original Portal. There are also a few areas that play with verticality and having the whole world roll away from you as you move up and down, just as it does when you move side to side. A 4-story building makes the world shrink into the distance. A catapult launches you into a view of the world that looks like one of those small planet iPhone photos. And platforming in an art museum feels precarious even though you're only really going 20 feet or so up. It almost manifests a better vertigo than simply adjusting the field of view, because the world is shrinking below you to emphasize your height. It's not just that your view is expanding. And while it's arguably a spoiler, I also have to gush about the farm. Hyperbolica's hub world and its various levels all more or less use the same non-Euclidean rendering method, but the farm wraps its Poincaré disk up spherically into its skybox, which means that as things get further away, they get smaller, until they reach the edge of the disk, at which point they start coming towards you and getting larger up in the sky as you move away from them. This makes, say, walking away from a fenced-in area really trippy, because the fence flies overhead, inverts, and then lands back in front of you as you move around the space. It is nauseating and awesome. As an adventure game, Hyperbolica knows pretty much everything has to be about movement, because its big selling point is this new way of rendering and moving through space. Consequently, there's a bit of everything you can do with this idea. A maze in a world where straight lines don't exist as we know them and maps are less useful than you'd think. A brief first-person shooter snowball fight, a little bit of vehicle racing, a little bit of platforming, spatial movement stuff that takes advantage of the conceit. Even the farm's core mechanic is about shooting gophers when they're unaware of you by standing in positions that let you shoot up at the gopher next to you. And it works, broadly, but I worry it can alienate players looking for something more mechanically substantive. Like, it's all shallow intentionally, because you're having to relearn how to move through space, and that's difficult enough. Some of the game's timed challenges are actually a little bit tough. But the game's light, cute tone and focus on basic mechanics with no cohesion or depth can start to feel a little bit like a tech demo reel at times. Really, the game reminded me a lot of Broken Reality. Both it and Hyperbolica are extremely into vaporwave aesthetics, for one. Though Hyperbolica reserves that mostly for its art museum world, while Broken Reality is simply soaked to the bone in it. But both are also games about virtual worlds that are rebuilt on the ruins of a previous virtual world that still holds some secrets and some sway over the present. And they're both about how their respective worlds mask a more fundamental brokenness. But Broken Reality is way more upfront about it. I don't want to spoil anything, but Hyperbolica is holding a surprising darkness at its core for what is ultimately a super upbeat and humanistic game. It ends happily, mostly. It just goes from a game that is full of paper-thin stock characters to a game that very suddenly throws up some pathos, and that shift is jarring. Still, I think it works in the game's favor. Just when you think it's a superficial, bright, and chipper veneer over a cool rendering tech demo, the game actually gives you a reason to care about its world. I'm not sure how to wrap up something this short, because normally I've gone on about some big theme that I can use to close out on a profound note, and I don't really have that here. So I'll just say that Hyperbolica is adorable. The game's short, you can easily beat it in an evening if you know what you're doing, and if not, maybe two, and it's doing some really cool stuff visually that I've just never seen done before. If it seems up your alley, pick it up on Steam or itch, I'll include the links below. And let me know if semi-regularly dropping short episodes like this works better than a giant blip episode of 3 to 5 games every few months. Till then, it's back to the writing mines for me.